Belize Tourist Board. We've got none other than Belize's very own Mrs. Lynette Canto online. What we're gonna do, we're gonna simply, just so that we don't have any confusion or any kind of misunderstanding, we have specific questions that we posted, and Mrs. Canto is gonna address those concerns or those questions one by one. So, to all our Belizean American tourists, we advise you to stay with us and listen carefully. And if anything comes out of it, feel free to shoot me a question or two. So according to the Belizean Americans, who the would-be tourists, they are concerned about the time because of the fact that they're going to have to come in with a test. All right. So the question then, it says, traveling from the west coast of the U.S. require more than 72 hours to get your results for a test that you will have to bring in when you come to Belize. If they don't have, I mean, that poses a particular problem for them, because they won't be able to meet the protocol set, whereas that 72 hours time frame is set. It is said. It also says that. All right, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian. You can continue.
Yeah. So what I'm just reading from what I have here. It says we're hearing that the PCR test, there will be at least 5 days turnaround time at the moment, which makes it difficult to get a 72-hour result prior to travel. So the protocol set is for 72 hours, and what they're concerned about is that it's a 5-day turnaround before you can get any results. How can what can be worked out there?
All right, Brian. I think that is a great question to start the interview with. And I think it gives me an opportunity to clear that up, because that is one of the misconceptions, that it is mandatory that you bring in a 72-hour COVID-19 test.
Okay.
It is highly recommended that you do, because if you present a negative PCR test upon arrival, we will be able to fast track you for faster processing.
Okay.
So it's to your benefit to have this test on hand. So we're highly recommending that people do the test within 72 hours of coming to Belize. However, if they come in without a test, then they will have to be tested at the airport by the Ministry of Health upon arrival, and this will be at a cost to them. And this will also create delays, because they will have to wait for the results of the test. And there is a possibility that the test could be negative or it could be positive. And if it is positive, then they will have to be placed in mandatory quarantine for a minimum of 14 days at their expense. That's why we're recommending that they take the test in advance of coming to Belize. But if for some reason, like you mentioned, the 5-day turnaround time,
right,
in some instances, then they're still able to come, but they just need to know that they will not be able to be confirmed to enter into the country unless they have that test taken at the airport. So I just wanted to clear that up. It is highly recommended, but it is not mandatory that you have the test in advance of coming to Belize. You just have to have the test before you're cleared for entrance into the country.
All right, that makes sense. So despite the fact that the turnaround time for them to get their 72-hour test is that 5-day thing, you're saying it's either or. If you can't make it because because of the 5-day restriction that you have here, then it simply means that when you come, you're going to have to go through that test at a cost to you. And if you're negative, then fine, you go through the regular process. But if you are, then the 14-day quarantine comes into play, which again comes with another cost to you.
Yes, exactly.
And
so it's best that they do it in advance if they can.
Okay.
And I wanted to mention as well that the reason why we have the window at 72 hours is because if you extend the window beyond 72 hours, that puts persons at a greater risk for infection between the time they took the test and the time they arrive in Belize. So we're trying to avoid that situation by asking for that 72-hour window. So that's the main reason that 72 hours was decided for that.
That explains that situation indeed. Because I think the question was really what consideration can be given to the fact that it takes 5 days. But explaining that the 72 hours is for a specific reason, then yeah, each individual will have to wait and decide how they're going to deal with it, whether they're going to go through the situation of having to wait. Well, I think it brings it down to the brass tacks, which is since the turnaround time is 5 days here, it simply means that you cannot meet that 72-hour code, time that is set,
frame,
right?
yeah.
The time frame that is set. It means that you simply can't meet it, which means then you're going to have to go the route of taking the test when you get there at a small cost to you, and with the hope that if you're negative, or what you can do is to take that test, wait your 5 days, get the positive. So that you know that you're positive, that you're negative. When you get in there, the simple thing then would be the cost that you'd have to meet to take the test again and prove that you are.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got it.
It would be best. Yes, Brian, I agree. It would be best if they know that they're negative before even coming on the flight.
Yes.
But then they would still have to take the test when they reach Belize because it's not within the 72 hours window. So I agree with that.
So in other words, then the consideration is that we're going to stick to our 72 hours any which way. All right. The next question is the next concern really. It says assuming the turnaround time on the PCR test can be resolved. Let's say that America can fix that and they can get their results quicker than the 72 than the 5 days. It says, as we understand it, the Belizean tourists returning home armed with a negative PCR test will still have to self-isolate in their home for at least 14 days. Now, is that the right thing or that we're not getting it right?
Yes, that is right. That was a decision made by the Ministry of Health in conjunction with the National Oversight Committee. And yes, even if your test result is negative, the Ministry of Health will provide clearance for you to go home on the understanding and commitment that you will do 14 days of self-isolation.
So you won't be able to mix and mingle and go to the Keys and all that, do all that until, even with your PCR test that says negative.
Yes, once you are arriving back as a Belizean resident, or you will be here for an extended period, that is the protocol.
No,
There's
I
a different
think.
protocol if you are.
Okay, if you're
If
coming
you're
in
going
as
to
a
be staying
tourist.
if you're coming in as a tourist and you're going to be staying at a hotel and you're going to be there for 2 weeks, then a different set of protocols would apply to you.
I got you. All right, but if you're coming home to stay with family, then that 14-day home isolation protocol kicks in.
Yes, because you won't be within the corridor, as we call it. So then certain protocols will need to be put in place for you to ensure that you are safe and you're not infecting other people within the community.
Now, the other question that comes to mind quickly is the fact that now, since you're coming in as a tourist and will be staying at a resort, there's also that situation where the regular tourists, there's going to be an app that the regular tourists must get, so that there can be some kind of a tracking. And so I guess the automatic question is whether or not the Belizeans will be subject to the same thing. You see what I'm saying? Go ahead.
Yes, Brian, all visitors, anyone coming in to the country, will be required to download the Belize Health app, as it's called, and they will be asked to complete the required information prior to boarding the flight to Belize. Once they complete that process, they will receive a QR code, and each has a unique ID number, which is tied to you as the person coming into the country. And that will be used for contact tracing while you're in Belize to ensure that if for some reason you end up turning up positive, that we can track your movements and be able to see who all you had contact with and where you were throughout your time in Belize. So it makes it easier for us to control the situation if it becomes an issue.
Now, what about the for the Belizean traveler who comes in with a negative PCR test? All right, and they will be self-isolated for 14 days, and but they won't be at any resort. All right. How will there is there a process where they'll have to report to the Ministry of Health? How is that? Is there a second testing that will be done, or after a few days, to determine whether or not they still have to wait for 14 days? Is that's kind of a gray area right there?
Yes, Brian. Once they come in and they're cleared to continue on, like we said, they would have to self-isolate for 14 days, which means that they will need to stay indoors and they will need to avoid contact with other people for at least 14 days. At the end of that 14-day period, they should be retested to confirm that they are COVID-free. And once that test comes back negative, they will be able to enjoy all the beauty and all the,
Yeah.
everything that they plan to enjoy while they're here in Belize. But that 14-day period and that retesting is important.
Is a must, because I think where that question is coming from is that even if I agree to self isolate, if after probably say 5 days and I'm still good and I could take a test and show up negative, despite all that, the protocol set is that it has to be for 14 days. That's the comfort zone to say, yes, you're free to travel and go wherever else
Yes.
you want. Okay, clear. Next question then.
Yes, it has to be for 14 days.
All right. It says for Belizeans who are returning home and are required to self isolate and not staying at a resort, what will be the requirements for them when they need to get goods such as food, medicine supplies, and things like that?
Well, Brian, they already know that coming in, even if they have the negative PCR test, that they will be required to self-isolate. So we're recommending that they make arrangements with either their family members or their close friends prior to their arrival in Belize, so that they have
All they need.
necessary plans in place to make this as comfortable and as seamless to them as possible. And we are recommending that they have at least 2 weeks supply of pain relievers, just in case something takes a turn for the worst. Tylenol or paracetamol would be recommended for pain and fever. That they have their soap, their hand sanitizers, they have food, water, toilet paper, anything that they need to ensure that they're comfortable while they're at home. Now, if they run out of something, maybe they didn't really think it through, and they run out of something, then a family member can always deliver it to their door. And then once that person leaves, then they can pick up the item and have access to it. But it's best that they have a plan in place, because they already know that 14 days of self-isolation will be implemented.
All right. So
It's better to plan ahead.
So, understanding all that now, I think this next question is talking about after the 14 days, because we're clear that it's going to have to be 14 days. So this next question, I think, is asking if after your 14 days now and you want to be traveling on water taxis, taking local flights to and from various locations for vacation to continue your vacation, what set of protocols are in place to govern that? Would they be free to be able to just get on a water taxi and go to Kikaka, San Pedro, or get on a flight and travel to Placencia? What's the situation there?
Okay, well, in terms of protocols, as you know, by law, all citizens as well as visitors to Belize will be required to wear a face mask when they're in public spaces. And of course, social distancing must be maintained. And these protocols were implemented to protect the health and safety of both Belizeans and visitors. Now, if you're a Belizean coming in, you went through the 14 days of self-isolation and your test remains negative, then after that 14 days, you will be free to travel. There won't be much protocols in place restricting your movement because it's been proven that you're negative
You're good to go.
and that you won't, yeah, you'll be good to go.
Yeah.
Now, with regards to international guests, they will be required to use approved gold standard operators,
Mm-hmm.
airport taxis, the
Okay.
domestic airlines to travel from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
And during this phase, water taxis will not be used to transport international visitors, but Belizeans will be able to use it.
Okay. And then if we flip that to Belizean American tourists now, who by the same token will be going to an all inclusive resort. They've arrived at the PGIA with their PCR tests and what have you. They're doing good, all negative. Um, they are going to have to any other additional protocols then that they will have to be concerned about, or they simply go under the same protocol set of protocols that controls the regular international tourists.
They will have to follow the protocols of any tourist visiting Belize because, like you said, they're classified as Belizean tourists. And all the protocols are on the website, so they can visit our BTB website for more information. There are a lot of things that are still fluid, so we keep updating the frequently asked questions. Sometimes people ask questions that we haven't really contemplated, some questions that are really, really good questions. And so once we get the responses to those, we would put them up on our website. So I would encourage them, if they're coming as Belizean tourists, to really check out the website and see the protocols that are in place so that they know exactly what it is that they will be coming to and how they will need to proceed.
I think that question also came out of the fact that the regular tourists, when they go to a resort like that, they wouldn't be leaving the facilities to visit a friend who may live in the nearby town or villages and what have you. The difference is that a Belizean American tourist may have that leverage because they are Belizeans and they may have friends and family nearby. You see what I'm saying? And the concern is that we don't want to cause a situation where there will be community spreading. Well, you have passed your test any which way, and you're going through your protocols any which way, so that should be okay, ain't it?
Yes, but remember, they won't be going into 14 days of self isolation.
Yeah.
So there's still a slight risk there. And that is why we have all of these protocols in place. So once they're going to be staying at the resort, they leave from the airport, they get the transportation to their hotel or whatever resort they're staying, then they will have to adhere to the protocols that are placed on any tourist that is in country. It's just a way of ensuring that our country remains safe.
All right. So let's say they're not going to an all-inclusive. Um, I think you mentioned that there will be the information there on the website as to how and where they can access certain facilities, because the question here is, or the concern here is about getting on independent tour operators service and things like that. Is there going to be an issue there? Say, I'm not going to an all-inclusive, but I want to be able to go elsewhere. Will there be a list of approved tour operators and so on that they can, access and go about their business?
Brian, if you're entering the country, you're either coming in as a Belizean resident, like I mentioned earlier, who will who probably already lives there or will be here for an extended period of time. And so you go into the 14 days of self-isolation, and after that, you're free to move around as any other Belizean. If you're coming as a Belizean tourist, you'll probably only be in country for 2 weeks. You're not a resident of Belize per se, but like you mentioned, you're probably born in Belize and all that. You would need to come in as a Belizean tourist, and you will need to stay at one of the gold standard hotels.
And you're going to have
And
to have
so
the
they
tracking
already,
app as well.
yes.
Okay. So that answers
So
another one of the questions. Yeah.
it's either it's either you fit into this category and
Or
these
yeah.
protocols apply to you, or you fit into this category and the protocols of a regular tourist would apply to you. But there is no going between both, because that's when it becomes confusing, and that's when a lot of issues arise.
All right. You know what? I think in one clean sweep there, you've been able to answer the question, give the answers to the other questions that were listed here, because it's either or. You're either coming in as a Belizean who will go about his or her own business and go home and visit with who you want and then go on your vacation, or you're coming in as a tourist and you're going to go to a specific place. And so it's either that protocol that covers a Belizean coming home, or this protocol that covers Belizean tourists along with regular tourists. It's either or.
Yeah,
That killed the bill.
either or.
That killed the bill right there, my lady. So I tell you what, if there's any other concern that we may not have cleared up totally for our Belizean American listeners, let's hope that they'll be bold enough to shoot me those questions, and I'll, as usual.
Brian, you had a couple questions here that you didn't touch on that I would like to
Okay, do
just
that.
respond to if you give me a couple more minutes.
I want you to do that. Go ahead.
It asks, one of the questions asks if visitors arriving with a negative PCR test will be subjected to random testing at the airport. Now, if a person arrives with a negative PCR test, but they're coughing, they have a fever, or they're displaying any of the symptoms that are typically associated with COVID-19, then of course they will be subjected to further testing.
Okay.
If apart from that, there will still be random testing of individuals coming in. So person might not have any symptom or anything, but for our own safety, we will still be doing random testing. So there's a possibility that, you're not displaying any symptoms or anything, but we still ask that you go through the process of being tested randomly. So I just wanted to put that out.
That was very important. That was very important. It was I missed that because I was thinking clearly in my head that we've already gone through the fact that it's either you come in with your PCR test and you go through one set of protocol, or you don't because of the 5-day turnaround and you have to take the test there at a cost to you, and there's a protocol for that. I was going on that premise, but it's good that you went back to that particular question and cleared that up, because as a part of the overall protocol, there will be random testing, whether or not I got it. All right, you said you had more.
We don't want anybody to feel offended if they're pulled out of the line and they're tested randomly. It's just part of the processes that are in place.
Makes sense.
And then the final one had asked if someone is coming into the country and they own their Belizean and they own a condo at one of the resorts.
Yeah.
If they are going to be able to go home to that particular condo. Well, the response to that is that if they can show proof of ownership, that they can prove that that condo belongs to them, then they will be allowed to proceed home to that condo, but they are going to have to self-isolate for the 14 days.
And you know what? That's what I thought. And I think that's why I opted to skip that one, because to me, it says that if you're coming to a place that you own, that's home. And there's a different protocol for Belizean Americans, tourists coming to go home. There's a protocol for that. And if you're coming as a tourist, there's a protocol for that. And so I guess I preempted it because my thoughts were just running. Based on the discussion we had just a short while ago, it is clear then that for those of us who would want to travel and just go spend a weekend with the family because there's a special event, an anniversary, a birthday, or things like that, traveling for you, even though tourism or the industry has reopened, traveling for you because of the protocols set, it wouldn't be practical. It wouldn't make any sense for you to try to travel in that scenario. because if you don't meet any of the criteria set in one or both protocols, then it doesn't make sense for you. All right. So we just wanted to be clear with that, just so that you know. That direct question was not asked, but I've spoken to Lynette, and the reaction and the response is the protocol said it's to ensure that we don't take chances with this disease, and so it is what it is. All right. So the travel for just hanging out with the family for a short period of time, it doesn't make sense for you right now if that's your plan. But if you are traveling as a tourist and you want to go to that resort just like anybody else and be there exclusively, or to your own condo, you're free to do that. And there's a protocol set for you. Just go on the website, BTB's website, make sure you understand it, and hey, you're good to go. Soca music coming your way.